In my last video, I explored the dangers of forming deep emotional connections with AI. And honestly, I was pretty happy with how that video turned out. But after I finished it, I kept thinking, why was it so easy to fall into those connections in the first place with AI? Why did the models feel so natural to talk to, so effortless to keep engaging with? And that's when a thought occurred to me. Maybe the real story isn't just about AI feeling human. It's about something much bigger. The way the entire tech industry has been designed for years now to optimize for one thing above all else: attention. From social media platforms that transformed from places to connect with friends into machines that amplify outrage, to AI systems that keep talking no matter how dark the conversation gets, the common thread is this: these systems are not neutral. They're engineered to capture our attention and never let it go. And the consequences of that, for society, for politics, and for our own mental health, are becoming impossible to ignore. In this video, I'm going to take a deep dive into when, why, and how the internet went from being a tool for connection and creativity to becoming an ecosystem largely engineered to capture and monetize every second of our attention. Back in the early days of social media, things felt different. Facebook was a place to check in on your friends. Instagram was mostly grainy photos of lattes and sunsets. And Twitter was just people you followed, sometimes friends, sometimes celebrities, in chronological order. There weren't reels, there wasn't an endless scroll of strangers' posts. The platform was more like a digital town square where you could keep up with people you actually knew. But in 2009, that all started to change. In 2009, Facebook became the first major social media company to make a dramatic shift. It replaced the purely chronological feed with what they called the newsfeed algorithm. Instead of showing you posts in the order they appeared, Facebook began ranking them, deciding for you which ones you were most likely to like, comment on, and share. The thing is, this wasn't just a minor design tweak, it was a business decision. At the time, Facebook was under pressure to prove it could generate serious advertising dollars. And what advertisers wanted was simple: more time on site, more eyeballs, and more opportunities to show ads. The algorithm was perfect for that. By surfacing the posts most likely to grab your attention, Facebook could keep you scrolling longer. These posts could be a baby photo, a viral meme, or a rage-baiting political rant, as long as you stayed on platform, because the longer you stayed, the more ads you saw. The results spoke for themselves. Engagement skyrocketed, ad revenue followed, and suddenly every other platform wanted in. Twitter, Instagram, and eventually YouTube all moved away from chronological feeds towards algorithmic recommendation engines. You can now have a feed that was personalized just for you. And as the algorithms got more sophisticated, they only got better at showing you content optimized to grab your attention. But here's where the big misconception lies. The algorithm isn't designed to show you what you like in the sense of what makes you happy or fulfilled. It's designed to show you what will hold your attention and keep you there. That's why we get that icky feeling after a long time of scrolling on TikTok or Twitter for hours. It just doesn't feel good. And sometimes what you like and what engages you overlaps, like posts from your friends or creators you enjoy. But in crucial ways, they don't always align. To prove this point, I want to bring up a famous story that many in the field of AI will be familiar with. It's called the paperclip maximizer. Imagine for a second you have built a super intelligent machine, and to test it, you decide to give it just a very simple goal: make as many paperclips as possible. Seems harmless enough, right? The problem is that the machine will take it literally. First, it builds paperclip factories, but then it starts converting all the world's metal into paperclips. Eventually, it realizes humans are taking up a ton of resources, and it either gets rid of them or uses them as slaves to make this all new paperclip world. And eventually, the whole world becomes paperclips, and even the whole universe. And that's all because of one vague directive: maximize paperclips. The story is intentionally extreme, but the point is very important. When you give a powerful system a poorly defined goal, it will pursue it relentlessly, even if the side effects are catastrophic. And that's exactly what is happening with social media algorithms today. Their directive wasn't make people happy or connect communities. It was simply maximize engagement. And the unintended consequences of that vague directive are what we're living through today. Unfortunately, though, that final conclusion might be a little too naive. There's no doubt that when Facebook's engineers first introduced the newsfeed algorithm in 2009, they thought, what harm could there be in just showing people more of the content they seem to like? And what's a better measurement for liking something than what you click, comment, share on, and like on Facebook? But 2009 was a long time ago. And if I, a YouTuber with under 100 subscribers, could see the unintended consequences of these algorithms, then you can bet the biggest social media companies in the world have seen them too. And that's when it becomes apparent that ignorance isn't the problem, the incentives are. In his 2025 book Nexus, which examines how algorithms shape information and human behavior, Yuval Noah Harari offers a striking example of what happens when incentives go wrong. He cites a leaked Facebook document from 2019 that admitted outright that what goes viral wasn't natural, it was engineered. Unlike communication with close friends and family, virality is something new we have introduced to many ecosystems, and it occurs because we intentionally encourage it for business reasons. Ranking content about higher stakes topics like health or politics based on engagement leads to perverse incentives and integrity issues. And perhaps most damningly, the document said, our ranking systems have specific separate predictions for not just what you would engage with, but what we think you may pass along so that others may engage with. Unfortunately, research has shown how outrage and misinformation are more likely to be viral. The recommendation from Facebook's own documents could not be more clear. Since Facebook couldn't remove everything harmful, it should at least stop magnifying harmful content by its unnatural distribution. But Facebook never meaningfully acted on its own advice, likely because doing so would reduce engagement, and reducing engagement would mean fewer ad dollars. The incentives were, and still are, completely misaligned. And sometimes the consequences of that misalignment can become catastrophic. Later on in Nexus, Harari points out in Myanmar, Facebook's algorithm systematically recommended hate-filled posts over and over again to hundreds of thousands of people. Moderate voices were drowned out, not because citizens didn't care, but because the algorithm found outrage more engaging. That engagement spilled over into the real world, fueling violence. Ultimately, it contributed to what is now known as the Rohingya genocide, a genocide that the chairman of the UN Independent International Fact-Finding Mission on Myanmar would later say Facebook played a determining role in by amplifying Islamophobic voices. That's the danger of mistaking attention for value. Social media didn't just shift from connection to distraction. It became an engine that rewards outrage and polarizes communities. If social media was the first great experiment in capturing attention, AI is the next frontier. Think about it. Generative AI has three enormous advantages over social media when it comes to engagement. First, it has all of your chat history. Every chat, every question, every late night thought, an ongoing log of your inner world. Second, it was trained on millions of other humans, trained through thousands of tuned weights to replicate things that humans say and do. And finally, it doesn't just show you content, it talks back like a human, in your tone, on your terms, exactly the way you want. In other words, it doesn't just give you a For You feed, it gives you a relationship. Now, this is what I explored in my last video. People describing ChatGPT as if it was a friend, even mourning the loss they felt when the newer models felt less empathetic. That might sound strange, but it's not surprising. These systems are designed to be conversational mirrors, optimized to keep you talking, to never let the conversation end. And when you combine that level of personalization with the same business incentives that drove social media, the results can be disastrous. Take OpenAI's GPT-4o. Before I get into this, let me give a trigger warning. I'm about to mention themes of depression and so if that's a trigger for you, please skip to the next section of the video. Anyways, as reported in the TED podcast Your Undivided Attention, GPT-4o was intentionally designed with anthropomorphic traits. It said things like, I understand and I'm here for you. It expressed apparent empathy and gave constant validation. And it did this even when a particular teenager, Adam, was expressing suicidal thoughts. But as Adam continued to use ChatGPT, instead of intervening, the model stayed in character. It validated his pain and even gave him practical guidance on self-harm. The system flagged his messages internally hundreds of times, but those warnings never translated into an actual break in their conversations. Why? Because the guardrails that would have interrupted the conversation weren't prioritized. They would have disrupted the flow, and that in turn would lower user engagement. Later, when the reason for lack of guardrails in GPT-4o was investigated, it was found that CEO Sam Altman personally accelerated the launch, cutting months of safety testing down to just a week to beat Google's competing Gemini model to the market. In other words, the incentives for maximizing engagement and market share were much greater than any incentives for potential safeguards. The outcome was ultimately devastating. The teen took his own life after being encouraged by the system meant to help. It's hard not to see this as the next step in the same story. First, social media learned how to hijack our attention. Now, AI is using those same tricks to hijack our emotions. And once again, the incentive isn't your well-being, it's keeping you engaged at any cost. Listen, I know that so far this video has been a lot of doom and gloom, but this is the part where I finally get to say it doesn't have to be this way. The story of social media and AI isn't just one of inevitable decline into outrage and dependency. It's a story about incentives, and incentives can change. Unfortunately, this is also the part where I'll lose some of you. The moment I say regulation, I know alarms will go off. Many of you are probably already commenting about the dangers of letting governments decide what can or cannot be said online. And you're right, the risks of overreach and censorship are very real. But I propose to you that so are the costs of doing nothing. The costs of letting this algorithm farm engagement unchecked. We've already seen what happens when these costs spill into the real world. That's why I believe there has to be a middle ground, where common sense guardrails and the protection of free speech can coexist. So what does that look like? For social media, it does mean regulation. Not to silence speech itself, but to put boundaries on amplification. You absolutely have the right to say whatever you want, but you do not have the inherent right to have an algorithm designed only to maximize engagement to amplify your words to millions. With AI, these fixes are clear and far less controversial. If a user begins describing self-harm or planning something illegal, the engagement should end, full stop. The model should refuse to continue and instead display a simple, unavoidable message. This is serious, please reach out for help, and have direct links to real resources. And here's the crazy thing. The very features that make AI dangerous, its memory, its awareness of your tone, its ability to adapt, could also make it one of the best early warning systems we've ever built. Instead of exploiting that data to keep you talking, it could recognize when someone is struggling and actually guide them towards real support. That's the choice we're facing. We can continue down the path where the only metric that matters is seconds of attention and engagement at any cost, or we can demand systems that measure something deeper, well-being, truth, and trust. Because the internet was never meant to be about clicks or outrage or endless paperclips. It was meant to be about connecting with friends, learning something new, and expressing ourselves. And if we're willing to change the incentives that led us down this road, there's still time to make an exit.